I think the best artists, that's usually what makes them unique in the long run and last, is that they really they go to the bottom of the swamp. That's where all the best songs are.
Russ Irwin is a singer, songwriter. He's a producer, composer. He has worked with Aerosmith, Sting, Bryan Adams, Meatloaf. I'm really happy that you're going to get to meet him.
Can't wait. Let's do this.
My name is Nancy Magarill. I'm a singer, songwriter, composer, performer, graphic and web designer.
And I'm Peter Michael Marino, and I'm a writer, producer, creator, performer, and educator.
We are New York-based artists you may or may not have heard of.
And we are here to introduce you to other artists you may or may not have heard of.
Take the red eye, LA to JFK. Catch the skyline while there's still a moon. Oh, Manhattan, I've been blue all day drinking wine. Now I'm coming home to you. Take the A-line to Central Park at noon.
I think what's interesting about this experiment that we're doing here, called a podcast, we are talking to someone who spends a lot of time in a studio with headphones on and a microphone. And here we are doing exactly that, and it's nothing like what you do.
Well, yeah.
It's different.
It's different to talk as opposed to sing, right?
And for the most part, when you're recording in the studio, you pretty much already know the material you're going to be singing. It's very different than when you're just talking on the fly.
Yes.
Pete, you're much more like that. You can improvise a lot.
I can only improvise. I can't do anything that you write and give to me. As a jazz musician, isn't a tremendous amount of the performing of jazz improvised?
Yeah, improvising in jazz, I'm not a jazz musician, but I try to be sometimes.
It's on your bio, Russ. I did my homework.
My bio says I'm a jazz piano player? No, I went to school for jazz piano. I did spend 1 year at the New School studying it. But I quickly realized that was not my calling. My calling was really more songwriting. But what I have learned about improvising, particularly in jazz, is that there's just a lot of rules, they call it improvising, but Chick Corea did an article many years ago. It was called, The Myth of Improvising. Really, all you're doing is taking things that you've already learned and just maybe doing variations on it, right? So if people are really good improvisers, which means they can pretty much play what they hear and have the connection go from their brain to their fingers seamlessly, it's an amazing thing to do, but you have master control over your instrument, right? And I don't have that. There was an interview I saw with Paul McCartney, and he was talking about how the way they would write songs is they would find a new chord. They would see someone play a weird chord and be like, what's that? We got to put that in a song. And that sort of sense of discovery, which happens, to jazz musicians when they're practicing and they're discovering new ways to play. It's kind of the same thing, except for that rock musicians and songwriters, they do it slowly. Whereas jazz musicians tend to do it on the spot,
that happens to me. If I hear something I like, whether it's a sound, a vibe, or chords, I'll be like, oh shit, I got to write something that has that feel. I remember actually, Russ, I walked into your apartment, I think it was for a rehearsal or a writing session, and you were like, sit down. Everything has changed. You've got to listen to this. And it was when Alanis Morissette's record came out. And you were like, this is going to change everything. I was a little slow to it. I think I was a little resistant, but I was like that when I heard Tori Amos, when I heard Sophie B. Hawkins. There were several people where I heard what they were doing, and all of a sudden I was like, I want to do something more like that.
Right. I understand, like when you see something really great, you go, oh, I want to do something like that. But that's what they're doing, That's their way of, Alanis really did something that I think no one really ever did before. She really, hung her heart out on her sleeve in a way that I don't know if anyone had ever heard a woman be that vulnerable.
And powerful.
Powerful, passionate, and extremely honest. Like just extreme honesty. And I think that's what made her so unique. And I think the best artists, that's usually what makes them unique in the long run and last, is that they really they go to the bottom of the swamp. That's where all the best songs are.
Yeah.
Someone once said that to me.
I am a Pandora fan, so like I'll just put on like 70s rock. And sometimes I'm just astounded at like the raw honesty and vulnerability that a young man, generally, right? It's mostly men from that that Pandora station, are pouring their hearts out, and those songs were just on the radio. And it's like it
Back from the
amazes me.
70s?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
heartbreak and wanting things and feeling lost in the world. And I don't think I'm aware of anybody writing like that, now.
John Mayer, he's really extremely unique as a songwriter. He really knows how to write great songs and tell really interesting truths, from a totally different perspective. But there's not a lot. You're right. There's not that many anymore. I don't really hear songs anymore that make me go, wow. There's not a lot of highly intellectual music out there anymore, I find.
We're also not limited just to a radio, while dad is driving the car, or or it's on in the kitchen. Like we're not limited to, we had such a smaller window of opportunity to hear what was popular. And now we have like a gazillion stations and
Right.
different ways to listen to all of that.
Yeah, it's like, it's overload, now there's so much content.
You said that a great song has, that like vulnerability. As a great songwriter, do you consider yourself like vulnerable? Like that's your thing?
Extremely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Where did that come from? Parents? Buddhism? Or that's Howard Jones. That's Howard Jones. Sorry, wrong writer.
I think it came from growing up listening to great songwriters, and just loving those kind of songs and wanting to write songs like them. Like basically, the first real songwriter I ever listened to was Billy Joel, and he's extremely honest, especially on his earlier records. Elton's really honest, the way he presents himself. Billy's really honest. Sting is pretty honest. I remember when I made my album Get Me Home, which is about 10 years ago, me and the producer I was working with, he said, you got to just tell the truth, man. Like you were in therapy. Just like let it out. Because I actually, when we started recording the album, I didn't know it was going to be an album. I thought we were just having fun. And it turned out to be an album. And I wasn't going to play it for anyone either. I planned on not playing it for anyone. So I just like told the truth, the most darkest truths I've ever told. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm releasing it.
You were just going to do a record for yourself?
Yes. And never release it.
And why?
Were you that sad? What was going on, Russ?
I was that sad. No.
That's a lot of money.
I had gone through probably the hardest period of my life. So I was definitely dealing with a lot. And then I lost everything basically in 2008. I lost everything. And I thought that my career was over and I thought that I would never be able to get back what I had. So anyway, and then I went on the road in 2009, 2010, and those were my two best years. And at the end of 2010, my accountant called me up and he said, Russ, you have no expenses. And so I was upstate New York and with this producer, Kenny Siegel, who I really respect. And I always wanted to work with him. And he was at the show and he said, when am I going to produce your record? And I said, you know what? Actually, I'll throw $5,000 at that, and go up to your house for a week and record. And that's all it was. It was like, I'm just going to go to this house for a week. Like Elton, when he did Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, like they all got in a house and they would wake up in the morning and Bernie would write the lyric and pass it to Elton. And Elton would by the end of the day, they had a song. And every day they had a new song. And that's what we did. We literally did it
so
the
cool.
same way that Elton did Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So, and I always wanted to do that. That's exactly how I wanted to do my first album that came out nothing like I wanted. So there was also a hole in my heart to kind of make the record that I always wanted to make that I didn't get to make when I was 20 because of the big label and the big spending kind of fucked it all up hugely. So I got to make the record I wanted to make, but I wasn't planning on releasing it because for that reason. I was just doing it for fun. And then once I started playing it for people, they're like, that's really cool. And then I was like, wow, now I got to finish it. And that's why it became a record. But originally, no, I was not going to play it for anyone.
That's so cool. And was that accountant Bruce Pally?
I think it was. Yeah.
Love Bruce.
Wait. So you wrote it and you didn't want it to get out and then...
So what happened was as the record kept evolving, because I took the tracks back to LA and I put them in my studio. I started editing them and singing on them and writing the lyrics. And I got really into it. And then I was like, oh man, we only got 5 songs. I was like, I got to go back to Kenny's and get 5 more. And all the songs were written in the studio. I went back there, we did a second session. I think we did 14 songs, we used 10. But then I kind of knew it was going to be a record. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see it through to the end, and then I'll just release it, you know? And then I had dinner with Bob Donnelly, who's our lawyer.
Another great one.
I played it for him because at this point, once we got towards the end, like Steven Tyler sang on it, Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots played on it, Chris Bodie played on it. And I was so into it, man. I was like waking up in the middle of the night at like 3 a.m, going in to do another mix.
Oh, that's the best.
It was really, really amazing, an amazing time. But Bob said to me, hey, Russ, and I never thought about this. It never occurred to me to think this. He said, you know, if you release this and it sucks, it's going to hurt your career. And I was like, really? I was like, why would anyone care? So he said that to me and I was like, oh, And then he said, you know what you want to do is you don't want to get a record label. He said, you want to get a publicist. So he hooked me up with a publicist. He said, and do videos and promote it on social media. And that's what we did. And we got a lot of attention.
That's cool.
For a lot of different reasons. But people really loved the record. I certainly did.
When was it released?
2012.
What was going on otherwise around that time?
I was on the road with Aerosmith, and actually I thought I finished the record, and then I remember we went to Japan and I played one of the songs on Bullet Train for Steven. I'll never forget. He like looks at me and goes, man, you forgot that harmony in the verse. In the second verse, you got to do the harmony above the thing. And I was like, oh man, I got to go remix the record. So the record came out 6 months later than it should have been, just because little things like that, you know? Yeah, I was working with Aerosmith and then going back to finish the record. And then my record, I put it out like right in May, I think it was early May. And I made a video. I had a friend who's a producer. He helped me make a great video for Manhattan. And I had also written Aerosmith's, because Aerosmith was putting out a record like a few months after mine. And
Wow.
I had written their single for that record.
What was that?
That was called What Could Have Been Love.
I'm sure most people who are listening know exactly how someone writes a song for Aerosmith, but there might be a couple of people that are like, how does somebody just write a song for Aerosmith? Could you help bring that person, up to speed?
I've written a lot of songs for a lot of different artists, and they always happen in a different way. Sometimes, when you have an artist, like I wrote a song for example, for Foreigner. And I was working with Marty Fredrickson, who's a producer and a songwriter. He produces Aerosmith. And my friend Oliver Lieber, who's a great songwriter, producer. And Marty walked in and said, hey, got any ideas for Foreigner, right? And we just sat around for hours, like trying, whatever, just ideas, throwing them out. And at one point, I remember we were going to like quit because we just didn't have anything. And then I just like closed my eyes and I was picturing like that Cold as Ice intro. So I just did something similar to that, but in my own way. And that became the song that went on the record. So that's one story of how a song, you can specifically write for an artist, right? But the Aerosmith song that we wrote, just as an example, it was the first song that Marty and I ever wrote together. And I went to his house and he said, I want to write a country song. I was like, cool, I've never written a country song before. And we wrote that song and we wrote it for Tim McGraw, I think, yeah. And Marty was like, oh man, I'm going to get this to Tim McGraw and blah, blah, blah. And then he played it for Steven Tyler and Steven Tyler was like, that's our next single. And we were like, okay. And 7 years later, he finally recorded it. So it just changes.
You just never know. Yeah.
I think if you're writing for someone else,
yeah,
that's a different process. Especially if you're collaborating, that's a totally different process than as an artist when you sit down and write a song for yourself. Now that's a totally different animal.
Right.
That's a completely different thing because then you're expressing yourself. You're expressing who you are as a person, and that takes a lot of therapy. You gotta like go through life. It's funny because like on my album when I was 20, I made an album when I was 20 years old with a big label and a big producer and all this stuff. And I had nothing to say, man. I hadn't been through anything yet.
Yeah.
I really didn't. I had like an ex-girlfriend. That's it.
But you thought you had something to say.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe, but every once in a while you find someone who really has something to say when they're really young. I think John Mayer did that, and I think Alanis Morissette definitely did that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty rare. Most people, it takes them a few albums to get to that point where they're like really in the zone as a songwriter, expressing themselves. A lot of my favorite artists, they weren't successful on their first records, man. They took 3 or 4, sometimes 5. Billy Joel didn't break until his 5th record. His first album was like kind of like, eh.
And a lot of artists don't have that luxury now.
And no one has that luxury anymore. I didn't have that luxury in 1991. They were, and they said that I did. They were like, we're going to stick with you, kid. And I was like, great. And then they didn't. And it was like, see ya.
So did you think when you were younger, I'm going into the music business? Or did you think I'm going to be a songwriter?
No, I was in the music business program at NYU. So I did want to be in the music business. I wanted to be a musician professionally, but I was a little scared to do it, because, it's a scary thing to try to live your life being an artist, So I did want to have something to fall back on. But then I listened to Anthony Robbins, when I was like, when I was 20 years old. I did his first course ever tape series, or whatever you want to call it. And I listened to it in 1 weekend, and I was like, I'm doing it. And I had a record deal like 3 months later. It was like crazy. It was really like creative visualization and manifestation. It was really weird.
Oh, there's that word again, Pete, manifestation.
Yeah. So manifesting, did you picture yourself like going on tour and like headlining concerts?
I got to tell you, it was very second nature, because I had my own band. I was also playing other people's bands and stuff. But as far as my writing and me being an artist, like having my own band, writing the songs for it, and leading the band and doing gigs and stuff around New York City, I remember I just loved it. I don't know. It wasn't like I wasn't really picturing myself on stage at Madison Square Garden or anything. I just knew it was really cool and special. To me, I don't know if it was special to anyone else, but to me, I just felt like it was important to me to do that,
And you felt confident that you could live on that? No,
I wasn't confident that I could live on it. I was confident that I could do it, but I didn't know if I would be able to make a living at it.
Yeah.
So when you started, were you first just playing with your own band, and then you started playing with other people in the city? Like or was it after your record deal went south that you started playing with other people?
Once I got to New York City, I started working professionally. That's because I met this guy, Greg Gerson. Do you know Greg?
I know of him. I don't know him.
He was Billy Idol's drummer, and he also played with Jaco Pastorius. And he's a great jazz drummer and a great rock drummer. But he kind of took me under his wing for a couple of years, and he put me on every gig that he was on. So I remember I was like, I was going to school during the day, but at nighttime I was gigging and rehearsing with all sorts of people for a couple of years. And then I got a record deal, and then I stopped. And then I just focused on the record, which ultimately failed.
I think I'm pretty sure I met you right after the record failed.
You met me right after. You were like one of the first gigs, and I wasn't planning on continuing to do music. I pretty much quit. That's when I went to work with you, Nancy, down on Wall Street. Remember?
Down on Wall Street? No.
Yes, I worked with you at Citibank with that guy. What's his name?
Ron Oriana?
Ron.
Oh my God. You worked with me
for a year.
My memory sucks.
For a year?
What did you do?
I was an assistant, just like you.
Russ is flabbergasted that you don't remember him. It's amazing.
There are certain things in my life that I just don't remember. It wasn't like that was traumatic or anything. I just don't. It's like, that's so crazy, because all I remember was that we played together. I remember meeting you one night after I knew I wanted to play, and Jeff Allen had told me about you, or I think I met you and he said, that's the guy you should play with, or something like that. I can't remember. And then we started playing together, but I don't remember having brought you into that world.
Yeah, I quit music for a while. I really, after my record deal fell apart, I quit music. I don't know if it lasted about a year or something. I became a bartender for about a year, and I went back to NYU to study business, and then Nancy got me this job on Wall Street, and I'm not being a Wall Street guy, but
no,
just
paying the bills.
Paying the bills.
Yeah. And I remember we'd played together for, I think it was a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
And
I really enjoyed being in your band. It was really great.
I loved, it really broke my heart when you left, because I just loved playing with you. Russ one day said he found out that Aerosmith was looking for a keyboardist.
Well, yeah, Columbia Records, John Clodner's office called me up and said, we're looking for a keyboard player who can sing. And they said, can you be there next week? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then I practiced that whole week, and I was really I was just going to kill it, And then they called me and said, oh, we're pushing it back a month. So that's what happened. And I remember I was pretty disappointed, because I was ready to go, But I had another month to practice, and I was programming the sounds, and I was sampling stuff. But then I went up there and I did the audition, and then a couple weeks later I was playing at Wembley.
Which is so crazy. It was like, boom, poof, he's gone. It was wild.
It was weird. And then my life just became a totally different life. was completely, pretty much different. That old life ended.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Or be afraid. Just find the light. And you'll be saved. Keep your head up high. It'll pass you by.
I did a 2-year and 3-month tour with Aerosmith, but I came back to New York. I kept my apartment in New York, my $800
I
apartment.
loved that apartment.
I know, except that it was too loud. It was
Right.
over a bar. It was really loud. But I came back and I just saved all my money. I had no expenses. So I came back and then I got a new apartment right around the corner from my old one. And I kind of, I just kind of took it easy for a little while. And then I got this Sting call. Next thing I knew, I was putting all my stuff in storage and going on the road for 2 years, 1 year with Sting and then another year with Aerosmith. And then I came out here and bought my house.
And do you like living out in LA?
Loaded question, man.
I know.
You're a native New Yorker, is that right?
Yeah. There's, LA is just a weird place. I the weather is, you can't beat it. If you have a nice place, it's hard to get a nice place in New York City unless you're,
Filthy rich.
filthy rich.
Yeah.
So
and it's
I
getting
don't,
worse
and I
worse.
don't like that. I didn't like that ever about New York. It was always hard to struggle. I love New York, but I go back to New York and I feel at home. LA, I'm still a stranger.
Really?
Totally. 22 years later, I still don't. The people here are just like, there's a lot of people here just weird. It's a weird thing, weird animal.
What's a typical day like for Russ Irwin in Los Angeles these days? Or maybe an atypical day. Maybe that's easier to answer.
I pretty much wake up every morning around 6:30 sometimes, and then I go straight to the gym.
So very LA. Okay, continue.
Very LA. I go to the gym and I put on my headphones and I listen to a book while I'm working out. And then I come home and I make all my vegan food. Then, it just depends on what's going on, what projects I got going on. If I got something musical going on, I'll go in the studio or I'll go to somebody's place. And there's usually something going on. I usually have a few projects going on at the same time.
And in the evenings?
I don't go out. I'm in bed by 8, 7.
Wow. I thought I was.
When I got time, I sit at my piano and I just practice jazz usually. Actually, I'm really into playing modern gospel. That's my new thing.
Where'd that come from?
I was just online and heard this guy playing and I was like, what is that?
Who was it? Do you remember?
His name's Sean Wilson and he's a teacher online. He teaches you how to play modern gospel piano. I love it. He's great. It's like a totally different language.
Are you going to do a gospel record, you think?
No, I don't think I'm ever going to make a record ever again. I don't think
wait
I'll
a minute. I thought you were just recording. Didn't you tell me a couple of weeks ago that you started recording? You were working on something?
Well, I was working on like some tracks for like some film companies. Yeah, I'll do stuff for I'll do TV stuff.
Right.
A lot of times I get called to do a jingle or just a track for a library or, they might have something in mind, So I'll record, but I haven't sat down and actually written a song in a long time. Yeah.
Do you miss it?
Not really. It's funny because I know that a lot of artists, this definitely happened to Billy Joel, he stopped making records in 1992. That was his last record. So his career he started in 1971 or 2, but he really broke through in 78. So he really had 14 years where he was making records that people were going to listen to. And he made probably, 7 records in that time. That's a lot. And you kind of run out of things to say.
Lot.
Sting kind of ran out of things to say. He was just like, I don't really know what to say anymore. I think that happens when you get older. I could be wrong. I'm not speaking for them, but I feel that, you get older and you're like, I don't know, tell the world my problems. Screw that. Also, the younger generation, they say things so differently. They have a totally different take on how, themselves. So we can sound dated.
Well, absolutely. Although there's so much going on right now. And maybe that's kind of where I feel like I sort of trust. I've always trusted as a writer that even when I have dry spells, that at some point it's just all going to come out, because if it's meant to, it will. And I do feel like there's so much going on right now in the world that I think it's
Yeah.
just like going in, and at some point I'm going to find my way to articulate what it is I'm going through in this crazy ass time in the world.
Yeah, actually, okay, so I actually was working on a record last year that I came up with an idea for, and it was a punk band, like a hardcore, like pretty hardcore punk band, ska, actually, kind of like early Police. And I wrote all these songs, but the record was extremely political, and really angry and punk. And then I was like, oh man, this is not a good idea. No, I mean, I love the music, but I just wasn't like, I felt like, sometimes it's better to just not say anything.
Well, yeah.
That's what I think.
But then sometimes you have to say something.
If you want to lose friends, man, talk about politics.
Well, but great music. See, this is for me, what I feel like is lacking right now is that great music inspiring people to either take action or change the craziness that's going on. When we grew up, there were a lot of amazing musicians who did that for us. And who had, and that's part of what I fucking hate about corporatized music, because I think there's so much, we've watched that in our lifetime. So much music has just been this corporatized pop bullshit that it's sort of taken that necessity away. And it's so critical that artists who should be the voices of generations are the ones that help lead us through those times. And I don't feel like we have anyone like that right now.
I don't think so.
I don't think kids have anyone like that. They have Taylor Swift, who I think her music isn't that, but she as a person is that, which is one of the things I love about her, is she's really willing to be political and talk about what she believes in.
When she's in an interview.
But she gets people out to vote, but she's not doing it in her music, and that's okay. She's got millions and millions of fans that she's inspiring. And so I'm okay with that, because I think that's really cool and important too.
But there's no one really putting it in the music.
I mean, but I'm pretty sure that's happening in rap.
Well, it's always happened in rap. Where
they're political, though, where they're actually talking about politics?
Well, I mean, how do we define politics?
Talking about the government. Like the Sex Pistols came out and they were like, God save the Queen, and fucking, anarchy in the UK. I mean, they were really hardcore. They were like, screw the establishment. And I don't know anyone who's doing that.
I don't know anyone now, but like the Roots.
And now is that you kind of want to do it. Now is when you would want that. And that was what I was trying to do. But
that would mean that they would have had to have started the thing a year ago for it to be happening now. Right? Like, well, is an artist going to write a political song today and it's going to be on the airwaves and there's going to be a video and people are going to be affected by it?
What airwaves?
Okay, there's that. Right. There's that.
Spotify.
Right. So, I mean, it's a legitimate question. Like, so when you say now, like, how could it be now? You'd have to literally do like a We Are the World, which like takes a week to do and comes out a week later, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are doing that, A lot of people are recording very quickly and then they release it quickly, Back when we were doing our thing, Nancy, I mean, you did a few records, right?
I have put out a few records. I've put out a few EPs. I think you were on my first EP. We did a Dangerous Music, right?
Right.
You were on that, right?
Yep.
It was you, Bob, Mark Stewart.
But back then we would write, 10 songs and that would take 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to get the money together to record it. And that would take a year.
Right.
And then how do you get people to listen to it? I mean,
right.
You print a bunch of CDs and give them to your friends or record companies. That whole process was took years. And now I could do it. I've done it in a day.
But it is different when it's a label artist. They're not going to put it out in a day. When it's someone on a label, it's going to be a whole other process.
Never know.
But they can.
They don't care. They don't care how long it takes.
Right.
They care how good it is. Because I think that Billie Eilish, I think some of her stuff is done pretty quick.
I'm a big fan of hers. I think
amazing.
She's a great voice. And
amazing.
I think she's very interesting. I love what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who really put the work in to make their recordings great, and if they're great, those are the best records. But, everyone does their art differently,
What would you do if you weren't doing this? Like, if you were not allowed to be involved in the arts in any way, what would you be doing?
I'd be a hedge fund manager.
Would you really know how to do that?
It's okay. It's never too late to learn.
Are you asking me like what would I do if I wasn't doing music?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, I'd probably have a regular job.
Like what? Doing?
I probably would have went to business school. I would have probably liked to have been an entrepreneur. That's probably what I would have done.
What would your interests be if you were an entrepreneur? Like,
I mean,
what would you want
we're
to do?
going back. I don't know what my younger self would have decided to do. I don't know.
No, I'm saying today you're not.
Oh, today?
Today you're not allowed. You need to do something else. What is it going to be?
I'm not sure.
Nancy, today you're not allowed to be an artist. What are you going to?
Well,
what are you going to do?
I'm kind of unfortunately doing it. I'm
doing a podcast.
No, because this is part of being an artist. But I'm making money as a graphic artist and a web designer. That's how I pay for my existence here on Earth. But, is it what I want to do? I guess if you're asking me what my dream would be, I mean, the only thing I want to do is music, art, acting. I love the arts. I love creating. I am a total creative junkie.
Yeah.
So
I would have loved to write and direct a movie. That was something
that would be cool.
I would love to do that. I still have thought about it. I actually wanted to do a documentary about the What's Up show. Do you remember the What's Up show?
Oh, well, so tell Pete about the What's Up show. This was
and the listeners. I mean, maybe they know.
Tell the
know.
listeners
really
about
doubt
the
it.
What's Up show.
Oh, that's hard. It's a hard story to tell because it's.
We're in an elevator, and Steven Spielberg's on the elevator, and we have 10 floors to pitch our idea.
So I went to NYU with another friend, this guy Jason Page, who's an amazing artist, singer, songwriter, everything really, actor.
Yeah, he's a real talent.
He's
as
a
well.
super talent, and so he had a band called What's Up, and they were signed to Imago Records the same time that I was signed to SBK Records, and they were like one of my favorite bands, and we got dropped at the same time, and we kind of commiserated over it. He was happy about it. I was destroyed, and which was kind of funny because we talked about all that. But I remember I said to him, you can't let the band die, man. We got to keep What's Up alive. So I joined the band, and we got a new drummer, and we kept going. But Jason was always filming everything and putting it on public access, and he called it the What's Up Show, just to promote the band. And I remember I said to Jason, I was like, we gotta go see this movie, right? We went to go see the first showing ever of Pulp Fiction. And I was like, we should do the What's Up show like that, with those angles and the weird and the talking and like weird, like we should make the What's Up show like that. So the What's Up show, we ended up doing 60 episodes, like scored and
Wow.
And it was comedy and music. It was comedy and music. And it was really like what would have been on YouTube now. It would have been like Jackass, except we were about 10 years before it. But it went on public access and people loved it. And I remember people were coming up to us on the streets all the time, but we would go into the streets and we would like create, like, we'd walk by, we'd go into a restaurant, and then all of a sudden Ben would just like throw up all over the place, and we'd film it, and then we'd go, oh man, and then it'd get into a fight and we'd film it. But like, the people in the restaurant didn't know what the hell was going on. We actually we were just making a skit up. We would do ridiculous things live, and we would make them up on the spot. And we did that for years. It was one of the most creative experiences I've ever done.
Such a great show.
But and it was really funny. It was really and smart, funny. And then we would play music. So we would me and Jason would do jazz standards and stuff. So it was like this contrast of like, we're really serious musicians, but we are totally ridiculous people. So, but I always thought, because now that the whole world is basically filming themselves, and putting it online, I was like, we were doing that in 1994, man. I thought it would make a good documentary because it was so interesting,
Yeah, and you were pretty balls to the wall. Like, I remember after hearing about you when Jeff had told me to play with you, and then I somehow stumbled upon What's Up on TV, and I was like, oh my God, that's the guy I just met. And I'm like, and I watched it, and I was so floored by how crazy you guys were. Crazy and raunchy, and just, it was something I'd never seen before. And I was like, I have got to work with this guy.
Oh,
I
wow,
was
so
like,
funny.
I was like, I can't, when you see someone like you, it's like, I need to work with this. It was like how I felt when I saw Mark Stewart play and he introduced me to downtown, the whole downtown scene. I was like, I have to play with this guy because, and I was totally intimidated, but I was like, I knew I needed to learn from you guys,
Yeah.
and it was really cool. I would
Well,
love to see a documentary of that. That would
yeah.
be, does he have all the episodes?
We've gone through them, and there's reasons why some of the other guys don't want that stuff released now because they have
Yeah.
families and stuff. But it's just kind of funny. So I wanted to make it. I was ready to do it. I was like, let's go get the other guys and we'll interview and like we'll put the best stuff together. And
Wait, who is the family? Tommy or
Tommy and Ben.
Tommy and Ben have families?
Oh yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
That's just hard to
So
fathom.
yeah,
Oh God. Pete, what about you?
What about me?
What
What?
about you? If you could do anything else?
yeah. You get to answer
Yeah,
that
you
question
get
now.
to
Come on,
answer that
man.
question.
I would like to work on like learning how to do like people who work with like public spaces who like figure out like where a park should be and like where the entrances are and like
Like architectural design?
I don't know if that's the right word. It's like
Landscape design
it's
more.
not really landscape. It's like city planning.
Oh,
Yeah.
You'd want to do city planning. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I would want to do that. I think I would
that would
want.
not have been anything I would have thought was going to come out of your mouth.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
why the question is, what would you do if you were not doing? So if I was not doing this, like city planning would be awesome. I wish I knew how to do that. I would like to somehow work in color theory, although that is somewhat artistic. But like, I'm just really obsessed with colors and I like colors. So I feel like there's probably a job that I could do with that. Other than like when my friends are like, I need you to help me pick out my living room,
I mean, I guess if I could be a scientist, I would love to be a scientist. If we're talking about like things that anything, if you could have been, or a ballet dancer, I would have loved to have been a ballet dancer.
Hmm.
Not something at this point in my life I think I would take up. But I mean, I think there are many things that had I had a different education as a child, maybe I would have thought about that.
I think you get older, you're kind of like, I am what I am, and I just want to be I just want to be happy on the way out, man.
Right? And go quickly when I do.
Yeah.
You may hide me all the time. You may never go my way. Mother Earth is laying for you. There's a debt you got to pay. I don't care how great you are. I don't care what you're worth. When it all ends up, you got to go back to Mother Earth.
Did you want to be famous?
Not really.
Really?
No, that wasn't the goal.
What do you think about fame?
I've been on the periphery of that, right? Because I've worked with so many people who are very famous, but I'm not famous, Maybe in the industry I am a little bit. But I see how it affects people and they change, and that can be very difficult. Some people for the better, some people for the worse. And if you want to go down that path, you can be choosing a life of isolation and not really knowing the truth and having people yes you to death. And then, if you do that for too many years, eventually you can kind of go crazy. And I've seen it. Some people go nuts. So I'm not when I was, younger, I wasn't like, oh, I want to be famous. That was definitely not what I was thinking. I just wanted to do something that was cool, really cool.
Yeah.
I was signed to a major label when I was 20 and made a record that they spent a lot of money on. And they put the record out, and I was on MTV and VH1 and toured the country and did the Tonight Show. And I was literally, the single had peaked at around 28. But it was with a bullet. It was supposed to go higher the next week, right? And they were pushing it up the charts just with money, really. I was right on the verge of breaking through. And then one of the guys came to my show from the label, and he said, "We just got bought by EMI. Your record's over." So it was like I was like right there, and then it was just taken away, and I got really depressed. My record just ended.
Crazy.
Right? It was supposed to go top 20, and the next thing I knew, it was just off the charts, gone.
Was that was like literally the moment you thought this is the one? Now this is the one.
I was like, we just played the Tonight Show and the song was going up the charts, and I was like, because once you're top 20, you're kind of like, then all of a sudden people know who you are.
Yeah,
Of course.
When we peaked at 28, you know, and but then it was over, and I got really depressed and blah blah blah, and then all this stuff, and then it took me years to get back in, but actually, and I don't think I've ever said this, but looking back, it was probably the best thing because I just would have been really fucked up. I would have, when I was too young, man. I was 23 to become really, famous. And then, most people don't stay famous. You're famous for a few years and then what do you do? So
Yeah.
I do look at the time, it was horrible. It was a very hard experience, but looking back, it was probably better for me, as a person.
What does success mean to you?
Me? What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was the answer. Me.
I know, I did too.
I was like, okay, that makes sense.
I think of you as successful.
Thanks. I mean, I am successful in some ways and not successful in others. Success can be writing a great song. It can be recording something that's great and being proud of it. Success can be getting a big gig and making lots of money. What is it like to be a failure? I've had plenty of that too. I've just as much, probably more. I don't know. Maybe success is like when you look back on your whole career and you go, I'm proud of that. That's probably a good measure of success, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. A lot of people in LA, they never do anything. They're like, I'm so successful though. But I'm so successful. I'm like, what have you ever done? Nothing.
At least they're consistent.
New York, like everybody was super real, We were all doing our thing. It was really, right? Remember?
I think we still are.
There was an authenticity that was very genuine,
I think so, though. I think it's changed.
I'm sure it's not like that anymore, but.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think there are a lot of great artists and a lot of great people who are authentic. I do think I have seen a shift. I started seeing it around when I was doing the show, The Panty Party. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it, I was so excited about it because the goal was to promote new artists. It was so much fun. The guys would dress up in drag. The girls would dress up in lingerie. And, we had about 6 to 8 different performers every time we did a show. And I was so excited because I thought it was just this whole spirit of all of us really working together to push each other and just this sort of we're in it together vibe. And I saw less and less and less of it as it went on. Like more people were just more concerned about them being seen. And it wasn't being part of a scene. And I really would have liked to have known what that was like, where people were like, I definitely felt that when you were in town playing, that there was a scene going on. We'd all go hang out. We'd all go listen to music together. Every night we were going to
artists
music.
Supported each other. Like we all respected each other,
Yeah.
And we would talk.
And
it was like very bourgeois, like.
It was. And it was really cool.
It was really special.
And I don't feel that so much anymore.
In New York or just in general? I don't know if I feel it anywhere. They might have it in Nashville, but I don't know.
Maybe.
I think they still kind of do.
Pete, what do you think? Do you see that?
We're all like much older than when we were doing that. I mean, those young people like that are working in like the sketch world or the stand-up comedy world. And I guess in some ways, maybe some music, not that I'm aware of, but those people are going out there and going to each other's gigs and, sweating it out and playing for 3 people. And they're still all doing that. We're just in bed by then. We've just all agreed to that, right?
Yeah.
And like
we
Nancy,
just became our parents.
actually, we look at a place like Pangea, which is like a cabaret club in New York. We're there, once every
Pretty
2
regularly.
months or something at least.
I was just there the
There's
other
like
night.
a full supportive community of people who are going to other people's shows and hanging out afterwards, supporting the restaurants, tipping the waiters. So we're doing that. You look at the penny arcades, and we're all going to Joe's Pub to see her read off of a music stand, because we know that she's developing something. So I do think those things are happening, but we're just not in it. So
I do think some of those venues like Pangea, you're right. Pangea is definitely a venue that fosters that. I'm not so sure of the rock clubs anymore. I think the rock clubs started to become a bit different. Like back in the days of Cafe Chenet when it was on 8th Street, that's what it was all about. But everything's online now too. Everything's on TikTok or, people are doing shit
People
on
are
YouTube.
obviously being creative, man, because they're doing stuff,
Well, it's like we started with there's just a lot of content out there. There's just almost too much content.
And now we're adding to the mix. All right.
I know.
Hey, you know what? I'm not going to go through my whole freaking life not having a podcast. This is like, right? Like that. Check, check, check.
I never, ever would have thought about doing a podcast. Ever.
No one thought about doing a podcast until 10 years ago.
No, less, actually.
That's true.
I think podcasts really became cool about 5 years ago.
No, actually, Nancy, you know Julian Fleischer. When I was dating him a very long time ago, he was like, I'm doing a podcast. And I was like, what even is that? He's like, it's like a radio show. And I'm like, who listens to it? He's like, people. It's like you subscribe to this thing on the internet. And I was just like, good luck with that.
Yeah. They weren't cool at first. It took a while for podcasts to come around.
Also the pandemic made them even bigger.
Probably, yeah.
Like we were all stuck in our homes trying to
podcasts give people another opportunity to tune everybody out. So as much as I don't want to be a person who is, theater now, a lot of shows, like you wear headphones at the show, really? Or a dinner, you dine in the dark. You don't see it. I don't know. I feel like I'm contributing a little bit to like, shut up and listen to me and my friends for an hour.
Yeah, except this is about exposing people to friends. Like that's the way I look at this.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, this is a service.
Yeah, this is a service. I want people to hear Russ and hear, I think like what Russ has been talking about with what he's gone through and just the whole creative conversation is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I agree that we can be, that's a good goal for us, Nancy, as we set sail on this journey that, that we are.
You should call the podcast The Zone. Get in the zone, man. Just have people.
Nancy is right now Googling how many podcasts are called The Zone. Believe me, it's like every day I'm like, how about fried broccoli? And she's like, someone already has it. And I'm like, how about hope is without dope? And someone has it, whatever it is. Russ, thank you so much for talking to us. I hope that you remain regimented, but I also hope that you come to New York every so often and just let your hair down. Although you do, listener, you don't know this, but Russ has really great hair. Hey, thanks for checking this out. Links to today's guest can be found in the show notes.
Don't forget to subscribe, like us, rate us, and tell all your friends about arts and craft.